Have you ever felt your dignity crushed beneath the boot of someone who believed they owned your very breath? What you are about to hear may shake you. Picture a quiet patriot, a man who asks for nothing but the right to live free. Elias Ward, once a proud colonist, now crippled from the very struggle for that freedom, earns his bread selling herbs he gathers under dawn's first light. A humble patriot, a father. Yet to the English elites who rule our streets, he is nothing but dirt beneath polished heels. On this day, beneath a pale New York sun, humiliation becomes a weapon. Sir Alistair Whitcomb, wealthy loyalist with ice where a heart should be, calls Elias a traitor, a spy, a danger to His Majesty's order, lies meant to break the spirit of a patriot who can no longer stand. Literally, redcoat fists answer Elias's denial. Blood meets dust. His daughter Hannah watches, powerless. The crowd looks away, afraid. Freedom seems like a fading dream. Oppression, betrayal, the struggle for dignity. This is the price these patriots pay. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will ignite the very fire of liberty.
Welcome, my fellow patriots. From which city are you watching today? Check if you're already subscribed. Give this video a like. And now, let's begin our story.
Elias Ward was once a tenant farmer on Whitcomb's land, bending his back beneath the sun, coaxing life from soil that never truly belonged to him. Then came the fall, a frightened mare, a shattered spine, and the cruel transformation from laboring man to burden. Yet he refused disgrace. With rough hands and quiet resolve, he built his own chair, carved his own wheels, and gathered wild herbs to sell. It wasn't wealth, but it was honor, his liberty, his way of saying he would not kneel. The English despised that kind of dignity. Sir Alistair Whitcomb, draped in silk and arrogance, never forgave tenants who carried pride in their eyes. Elias had become far more dangerous than a beggar. He was a reminder that a patriot could lose everything and still refuse servitude. Weeks earlier, Elias had seen something few survived to tell. Micah Boone, a humble farmer, father of 3, pleading for water rights, and Whitcomb ordering the rope. A hanging performed not in darkness but under daylight to teach obedience. Elias saw the truth, and truth to tyrants must be silenced. Now, in the square, Whitcomb's voice dripped venom as he accused Elias of rebellion. Redcoat hands gripped the chair. Hardwood groaned under their tightening fists. If they broke that chair, they wouldn't just destroy Wood. They would break the symbol of his independence. They would make crawling his only fate. Elias tasted blood. The crowd watched in tortured silence, wives clutching children, fishermen with calloused palms clenched into fists they dared not lift. They all knew this ritual of shame. Today it was Elias. Tomorrow, any of them. Hannah wasn't there to shield her heart from what they did to her father. Fever burned her small body that morning, left in the care of the schoolmistress, Abigail Price. Elias thanked Providence for that. Mercy, yet also feared what Hannah might think if he didn't fight, if he surrendered his dignity to the boots of cowards. The humiliation deepened when Corporal Pike leaned close, whispering a twisted promise. They would drag Elias through the market dirt until his hands scraped stone. Then Whitcomb would fix his rebellious tongue. The threat slithered beneath Elias's ribs, not fear of pain, but fear of leaving his daughter orphaned in a world that devoured the weak. Anger rose in him, not wild, but righteous. A spark of revolt born from every stolen acre, every silenced cry, every colonist's sacrifice. He looked straight into Whitcomb's eyes, and he smirked, a subtle act of rebellion, and Whitcomb saw it. Rage twisted the magistrate's refined face. "That will be the last time you defy me," Whitcomb hissed. The chair lurched, wheels scraped. Gasps broke from the crowd. In that instant, Elias felt a revelation harden in his soul. Freedom was not granted. It was seized, even by a broken man. And while his body remained trapped, something inside began to rise. A decision formed. A hidden truth emerged. The journey of a patriot does not end with disgrace. It begins there. The order struck like a hammer across the square. Traitors drown like curs. Whitcomb's sentence hung in the air, foul and heavy, a sentence of terror masquerading as justice. Redcoat boots shoved Elias's chair into motion, wheels shrieking against the stones. A tortured sound echoing every insult the English had poured upon this land. The path carved toward the Coldwater River, a place meant for cleansing or for disappearance. Gideon Cross marched just behind them, thick rope coiled in his hands like a serpent ready to tighten around a patriot's throat. Cross wasn't a soldier born, but a man who traded compassion for wealth, siding with the crown to rise above his fellow colonists. A Tory by ambition, a betrayer by choice. His eyes were a cold, hard grey, as if every spark of humanity had been bled out long ago. Townsfolk followed at a distance, drawn by dread, held back by fear. Bakers, carpenters, young militia boys who had once dreamed of independence now stood silent, fists shaking in the folds of their coats. They witnessed degradation and told themselves survival required obedience. Yet shame flickered in their gaze, a growing recognition that their silence fed the tyranny choking their land. Elias felt each jolt of the chair as a reminder of his fragility. Pain radiated from the old injury, but deeper agony burned in his heart. The ache of betrayal by those who should have stood beside him. His voice strained against the roar of the river ahead, and he looked back only once, imagining Hannah's eyes. "Don't cry, Hannah." A prayer more than a command. The wind devoured the words. His mind raced through every sacrifice that had brought him to this moment. Years of labor under Whitcomb's thumb. Defending dignity others tried to strip away. Bearing witness to Micah, Boone's death, the spark that had marked him for this grim fate. Elias had never sought rebellion, but now he understood. Tyranny forces ordinary souls into the fight. Dependence kills a man more thoroughly than drowning ever could. True liberty begins where submission ends. The Coldwater River snarled as it came into view, its surface wild and unforgiving. Whitcomb paused on the bank, savoring the spectacle, a noble pretending to be a god, deciding who deserved breath. "Bind him," he commanded, voice smooth and poisonous. Cross obeyed, wrapping rope around Elias's chest and chair, making wood and flesh one captive body, a twisted ritual of control. Elias closed his eyes for a heartbeat, gathering the remnants of hope. Somewhere, in every heart silenced by fear, he believed a spark of revolt was waiting. He opened them again, and the river reflected storm clouds gathering overhead, as if the sky itself raged against the injustice. What the English considered punishment, this attempt to erase a man, might become the revelation they feared, because even a broken body can carry fire within. Even from the brink of the river, a patriot's journey can surge toward transformation. As Corporal Pike and Lark dragged the chair closer to the torrent, Elias's fingers curled tight around the wooden arms, knuckles white with resolve not to surrender his dignity. His enemies saw a cripple. They forgot. Courage does not need legs to stand. The ropes tightened. The river waited, and destiny, unseen, shifted its course. Caleb Turner stood hidden among the crowd, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. His flax-colored hair fell into his eyes, but he didn't dare move. Not while Whitcomb played executioner with a patriot's life. Caleb's cart was empty today. No hay, no barrels, only the crushing weight of helpless rage. He watched Elias dragged toward the river, that hand-built chair grinding across the stones like a dying heartbeat. He wanted to shout, wanted to fight, but his voice would only earn another rope, another grave. So he memorized everything, every word of contempt, every sneer, every threat. He recorded Whitcomb's cruelty in the only ledger that mattered. The truth, the Patriots would soon turn into fire. When the crowd dispersed, he slipped away, heart pounding with a new purpose. Hooves struck the dirt as he guided his horse down the shadowed pine roads. The night air was sharp, and its silence filled with the unspoken cries of those who had lost their dignity to men like Whitcomb. Caleb whispered a vow to the trees. This shame would not stand. He reached a secluded farm where the lanterns never shone toward the road. A door opened before he knocked. Captain William Mercer stood framed in the dim light, broad shoulders rigid beneath his worn militia coat. Scars mapped his face, echoes of battles fought on the frontier where British promises dissolved into betrayal. He didn't waste breath on greetings. Caleb repeated every vile sentence. Spat from Whitcomb's mouth. He spoke of the rope, of the laughter, of the river's roar waiting to swallow a man whose only crime was resilience. With each detail, Mercer's eyes darkened, not with fear, but with a warrior's wrath long restrained. "He used our name to murder a colonist," Mercer said, voice low as thunder building on the horizon. "Then he called us toothless." His fists tightened at his sides. There was humiliation in that insult, yes, but also a revelation. The Crown believed the Patriots broken, and that mistake would cost them dearly. In the corner, Thomas Avery tended his long rifle with a reverence others reserved for scripture. A marksman unmatched, steady as winter ice. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. He just slid the ramrod home and inspected the barrel one last time, as though he already knew the decision Mercer would make. "Name the hour, Captain," Avery said, the words calm, almost gentle, but forged from pure rebellion. Mercer's silence held 1,000 unspoken oaths. He gazed out into the night, seeing beyond the darkness to a path that would change more lives than their own. One choice, one act, one spark to ignite an uprising. The struggle for independence wasn't born in speeches. It was carved from the courage of common men who refused disgrace. "Before dawn," Mercer finally answered, steady and sure, "we will not allow a patriot to drown alone." The room shifted, not from movement, but from transformation. Fear evaporated, replaced by conviction. They weren't merely planning a rescue. They were preparing a declaration carved into the bones of oppressors, a reminder that every insult, every degradation, every crime committed beneath the Crown's banner would be repaid with interest. Caleb exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. He thought of Elias's daughter, feverish and frightened. He imagined her waking to a world without a father, or to one where her father rose from the river to prove liberty cannot be. Murdered. One outcome reeked of despair. The other demanded sacrifice. Outside, the first gusts of a coming storm bent the trees. Nature itself seemed to brace for what dawn would bring, a collision between tyranny and defiance. Mercer strapped on his powder horn and took up his musket. Avery slung the long rifle. Caleb fastened his coat, heart steady now. This was no longer a choice. It was a duty, a journey from silence to resistance. They rode into the night, 3 patriots against the might of an empire, but the cause of 1,000 souls rode with them. The Silver Lantern Tavern creaked beneath the weight of decisions that could not be undone. Its windows were shuttered tight, trapping the lamplight like a secret. Captain Mercer stood at the center of the room, posture resolute, eyes burning with purpose. Around him gathered 6 ordinary souls shaped by hardship. Thomas Avery with his long rifle resting like a judge across his knees. Jonah Cutter, a lean tracker whose silence spoke louder than sermons. Noah Briggs, the blacksmith whose arms seemed carved from iron. Ruth Ellison, calm as winter steel and twice as lethal. Caleb Turner, fists still trembling with fury. And Ephraim Cole, the quiet farmer whose grief had become a blade since taxes stole his wife's medicine. No fanfare, no grand speeches, just a single Bible placed beside a tattered broadside of the Stamp Act, oppression inked into law. Mercer laid his hand on both, his voice low but unyielding. For dignity, for liberty. One by one they joined him, palms pressing against scripture and outrage alike, binding themselves to a cause greater than breath. The oath was short, but it thundered through their bones. They saddled their horses and rode into the darkness, toward the river, toward confrontation, toward destiny. On the road, Jonah halted, raising a clenched fist. Hooves had whispered through the brush ahead. A rider, royal courier, cloak marked by the crown, slithered from the direction of Whitcomb's manor. Jonah tackled the man before he could reach for a pistol, pinning him to the dirt with a hunter's precision. Avery stepped forward, barrel aimed at the courier's skull. Not trembling, not hesitant. Caleb searched the leather pouch strapped to the man's chest. His breath caught as he drew out a sealed letter stamped with the magistrate's crest. Mercer broke the wax with a thumb. His eyes skimmed the lines, and with each sentence the truth grew more monstrous. Orders of illegal land seizures authorized by Whitcomb himself. The execution of Micah Boone described not as justice, but as a display to discourage sedition. The words dripped arrogance, a noble admitting murder because he believed no one would dare challenge him. As if colonists were cattle, not men. Proof, betrayal not in rumor, but in ink. A revelation sharp enough to cut the crown's lies to ribbons. Noah Briggs growled deep in his chest. Ephraim Cole muttered a prayer, though his voice broke with something darker than fear. Ruth Ellison simply loaded another cartridge, resolve hardening her gaze. They knew this document could change the entire struggle, expose the hidden truth of tyranny to every colony. It was a weapon far deadlier than any musket. "We ride faster," Mercer said. "Whitcomb feeds on despair. We'll give the town hope instead." Caleb tucked the letter close to his heart, a reminder that their rebellion was not born of anger alone, but of justice long denied. The wind pushed them onward, bending branches like bowed backs of laborers who had carried humiliation too long. Every hoofbeat echoed the journey of a people awakening. There would be sacrifice, blood, decisions that could not be taken back. And yet, beneath the fear, something fierce was rising, the spirit of independence refusing to drown. Ahead, the night opened into a clearing where the Coldwater River snarled beneath a moon that seemed to hold its breath. Elias Ward's fate waited. Somewhere in the roar of that current, the riders slowed, hearts bracing for the clash between oppression and uprising. Right, the flame of freedom lives in me. The sky was still black when the Patriots reached the outskirts of Whitcomb's estate. Dawn lurked below the horizon like a secret, waiting to reveal what courage had done in the dark. Their breath misted in the cold air as they dismounted, each movement quiet, controlled, guided not by fear, but conviction. The river's distant thunder reminded them of Elias Ward, bound to a chair, life hanging by a single tyrant's whim. Ruth Ellison slipped away first, silent as a shadow. The rope ferry that connected the manor to the opposite bank sat idle, one clean cut, and any messenger attempting escape would meet only drifting currents and failure. Independence began with denying the enemy their certainty. Jonah Cutter knelt beside an old milestone along the road and drew 3 stark lines with chalk, a warning, a promise. Remember, cold water. That message would spread faster than any decree from a king. Whispers forged into rebellion. Thomas Avery surveyed the grounds, eyes sharp beneath his brim. A lone sentry stood by the smokehouse, lazy in his arrogance. One swift strike from the rifle's butt, and the man crumpled. No shot fired. Silence preserved. Avery dragged him behind stacked barrels, gaze already scanning for the next threat. Noah Briggs approached the manor gate, muscles tensed beneath his shirt. He drove a forged iron pin between the hinges, small, simple, devastating. The gate might look untouched, but the moment a soldier tried to haul it open, it would jam solid. Arrogance often fell not to cannon, but to preparation. Ephraim Cole stared at the manor windows glowing faintly with candlelight. His jaw trembled, not with hesitation, but with memories of his wife dying without medicine because English taxes demanded coin he did not have. Tonight, dignity would be reclaimed in the name of those who had already paid the ultimate price. Inside the group's formation, Caleb Turner held the stolen letter close, its edges damp with dew. Within that sealed ink roared every betrayal: the illegal seizures, the execution of Micah Boone, the command to drown a crippled patriot. The document was a weapon, proof that the British didn't seek peace, they sought submission. Captain Mercer stood at the front, studying the sleeping estate. Mist curled around the buildings like ghosts of all the colonists. Whitcomb had crushed beneath his polished boots. Mercer felt the weight of past battles pressing against the scars carved into his skin. The crown had always taken land, rights, lives, but the fire rising in the colonies promised a transformation, a nation reborn from the courage of farmers and tradesmen who refused disgrace. He motioned the others closer. Words weren't necessary. Their pact was already carved into their hearts. They moved like a single body, one heartbeat driving them forward. The Coldwater River moaned nearby, as if mourning what had already been lost. Elias Ward's fate was tied to that water. If they failed, liberty would drown with him. If they succeeded, the struggle would roar awake across every village and farmstead. Steps slow, muscles ready, spirits carved from the resolve of the oppressed. Inside the manor, redcoats slept in beds softer than any farmer would dream of, dreaming perhaps of glory purchased through another man's humiliation. They had no idea rebellion was already inside their gates. Mercer raised his fist. The world held its breath. The journey toward independence would not be remembered for fancy speeches nor noble titles. It would be remembered for moments like this, when ordinary people chose sacrifice over silence, defiance over chains. A single decision, inches from action, poised to split history open. The back kitchen door gave way with a soft groan, hinges yielding to righteous trespass. The manor's silence felt artificial, like a breath held by a coward. The Patriot slipped across the floor, boots whispering over boards that had never known honest labor. Darkness clung to corners, but their purpose cut through it sharper than any lantern flame. Stairs loomed ahead, a path toward the man who believed himself untouchable, toward the tyrant who mocked their nation in birth. Halfway up the landing, a door creaked open. A boy stepped out, 16, barefoot, nightshirt hanging loose on a frame not yet hardened by war. Arthur Whitcomb. Innocent eyes widened at the sight of armed colonists invading his father's realm. His lips parted, breath stuttering with fear. "Back inside, lad," Mercer said, voice firm yet controlled. There was no cruelty in it, only necessity. A flicker of defiance crossed the boy's face, pride inherited from poison, but instinct overruled courage. He retreated, shutting the door on his illusions of a noble father. The master chamber yawned open like a wound. Sir Alistair Whitcomb stood. Within, linen shirt hastily thrown over the arrogance beneath. He held a polished pistol, hand trembling, just once, but that single shiver betrayed the truth. Tyranny always shakes when confronted by the people it crushed. "You think you rebels frighten me," he spat, chin high, voice thick with contempt. Mercer stepped forward, musket steady. "Not here to frighten," he answered. "We're here to judge." Whitcomb's finger twitched toward the trigger, but betrayal moved first. From a shadowed side, room burst Gideon Cross, rope-burned hands reaching like claws for Mercer's throat. The overseer's snarl carried every insult he'd delivered to colonists who dared stand straight. Before he could make contact, Ruth Ellison swept in, swift as justice denied too long. Her knife flashed beneath the pale candlelight, one silent arc, and Cross collapsed, choking on a lifetime of cruelty. His body hit the floor with a dull thud. No one mourned. Whitcomb's pistol clattered from his grip. His mask of superiority cracked, revealing the frail coward underneath. A man who built power on the backs of those he deemed lesser. A merchant of humiliation, now bankrupt of courage. You have no authority," he stammered. "No king grants us our rights," Mercer replied coldly. "We were born with them." Caleb stepped forward, producing the sealed letter stolen from Whitcomb's rider. The magistrate's face drained of color. Proof of his crimes confronted him, undeniable, tangible. Land stolen, lives stolen, justice reduced to a spectacle designed to break spirits. "You murdered Micah Boone," Noah growled, "and Elias Ward is next." Whitcomb's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the river where the man in the chair awaited drowning. There, in that glance, he revealed a truth deeper than guilt. He believed these people powerless, until this very moment. Avery's rifle rested against Whitcomb's heart. "Where is he?" The magistrate swallowed, throat bobbing, fear finally louder than pride. The riverbank below the eastern cliff. The men, 2 guards, will wait until the first light. A rush of urgency surged through the room. Elias's time was thinning like a candle at dawn. But Mercer did not turn away yet. He looked into Whitcomb's frightened eyes and saw the entire empire staring back. Redcoats, taxes, gallows, chains, all of it built on the same lie, that a farmer's dignity was worth less than a nobleman's word. "You called us toothless," Mercer murmured. "You forgot. Wolves. Bite." Whitcomb flinched. The Patriots backed away, leaving the tyrant trembling in his sheets. They had no interest in killing panic. Their purpose was saving courage. Down the stairs, toward the door, toward the river where liberty itself was bound to drown. This was no longer a rescue. It was the beginning of rebellion. The night shattered at the river's edge. Whitcomb stumbled ahead, shoved by Mercer's unyielding grip. Mist curled around his ankles, as if the cold water itself hungered for justice. Moonlight revealed the marks in the mud where a chair had been dragged, the place where Elias Ward had disappeared beneath a crown-ordered tide. Villagers emerged from the dark in a slow wave, faces drawn tight with fury they had buried too long. Abigail Price held Hannah against her apron, arms wrapped around the trembling child, as if shielding her from the memory of her father's final breath. Hannah's eyes were wide, red, hollow. The spark in them had dimmed with the drowning of hope. Mercer stood tall, raising the stolen letter high so every colonist could witness the betrayal etched in royal ink. "Here it is," he declared, voice rolling like thunder across the bank. "Proof of the disgrace we've suffered. He called us seditious Yankee dogs. He seized our land. He murdered Micah Boone to keep others silent, and he drowned Elias Ward so no one would speak the truth." A low murmur swelled into a growl. Not loud, worse, controlled. A storm learning its strength. Josiah Reed hobbled forward, beard tangled, spine bowed not by age, but by punishment. "He whipped me," the old man said, voice shaking with humiliation, "for a cow that broke his fence. Couldn't lift a hammer for weeks. My family starved while he laughed." Scarred wrists lifted next. Martha Boone, widow draped in grief deeper than any grave. "Micah begged," she whispered. "He asked for water rights, for our children. Whitcomb ordered him choked by coarse rope, called it law." Her fingers curled as though still feeling hemp bite bone. "He told me to watch, said obedience must be learned." A boy no older than 14 pushed through the crowd, eyes wet but burning. "My brother was pressed into the Navy. We begged for his return. Whitcomb said the king owned our bodies. He spit on us." Whitcomb shook his head wildly, face bleaching to the color of the moon. "Lies, common lies. These people twist—" Mercer slammed the letter against the magistrate's chest. "Speak." The command sliced the air. Whitcomb, felt the circle tighten. Dozens of colonists staring, each carrying a memory of shame tied to his name. No guards to protect him now, no polished courtroom. Only the river he had fed with Patriot blood. His voice cracked. Yes, I authorized the seizures. I ordered Boone's hanging. Name them, Mercer demanded. Whitcomb's breath shuddered out of him. Micah Boone, Elias Ward. Another step from Martha Boone. And Whitcomb squeezed his eyes shut, as if the dark might erase truth. Samuel Fisher, Isaac Gray, Elizabeth Carter. Each name fell like a pebble, then a rock, then a boulder crashing into the river of rage. The water churned as though trying to return every stolen life. Caleb Turner stared at Whitcomb, chest tight with the revelation that tyranny had been wearing a neighbor's face. He looked at Hannah, her tiny fists gripping Abigail's dress, and he felt a vow crystallize in his bones. Elias Ward may have died, but his journey was not done. Liberty would demand that. Sacrifice be honored. The crowd pressed closer, breaths turning to smoke in the cold air. Not a mob seeking chaos, but a people remembering their dignity, their collective sorrow twisted into a blade sharper than any soldier's bayonet. Mercer lowered his musket a fraction. His voice was rough, scraped by grief and resolve. Every insult, every drop of struggling blood, every life you crushed was meant to teach us fear. A pause, heavy with transformation. But all you taught us was rebellion. Whitcomb trembled. For the first time, the master of this land felt the terror he had dealt to others. The river rushed behind them, waiting. Judgment had begun. The river roared like judgment itself as Mercer stood over the trembling magistrate. The stolen letter clutched tight in his fist. Coldwater's mist kissed Whitcomb's cheeks like the ghosts of those he'd condemned. He tried to summon his old composure, his noble sneer, but shame had hollowed him. Power had fled. He was just a man, stripped of silk and lies. "Alistair Whitcomb," Mercer declared, voice carrying through the fog and into every heart gathered there. "For degradation, for theft, for the drowning of Elias Ward, you shall taste the river you chose for him. No spectacle, no cruel gloating, only justice, unyielding, clean, unbreakable." Noah Briggs and Thomas Avery seized Whitcomb by the arms. The magistrate whimpered, boots scraping through the mud. The water churned inches from his face, feral in the moonlight. He twisted, once desperate, but the iron grip of the people he'd belittled offered no mercy. Mercer stepped closer, eyes like flint. "Look at her." Whitcomb resisted, until Mercer grabbed his chin and forced his gaze forward. Hannah stood there, fragile and fire-eyed, tears streaking her dirt-smudged cheeks. A child who had watched her father dragged to his death for the crime of surviving. In her stare, Whitcomb found a verdict older than any crown. His breath shattered. His knees gave way. The push came. Swift. He plunged beneath the black surface, cold and merciless. For a heartbeat he flailed back into air, sputtering protest, grabbing at dignity long forfeited. Avery and Noah forced him under again. This time there were no words, only bubbles rising like all the lies he had buried. The third time the river embraced him fully, and did not return what it claimed. Silence spread across the shore, not relief, not triumph, something deeper, the first breath of independence, roots of rebellion. Gripping the soil, Mercer's voice rose, strong as the land beneath them. "No king grants us dignity. No empire defines our worth. We claim it." He raised the incriminating letter toward the paling sky. "Let London hear us. We are not provincial rabble. We are a people." Heads lifted, backs straightened. The oppressed tasted a revelation as potent as liberty itself. But then, movement, a splash, a cry. Abigail gasped as the river spit out a broken chair, timber slamming against rock. Rope snapped. Wheels bobbed and settled, rough wood that refused to disappear. Hannah stumbled forward, knees buckling as she recognized her father's creation. Her hands grasped the soaked frame, knuckles white with hope and terror. "Papa!" The current shifted, swirling deeper below the cliff. Something caught, stuck, resisting the current's hunger. Avery pointed. Lanterns swung toward the dark shape lodged against the rocks. Not driftwood, not debris. A man, Elias Ward's hand, fingers curled around a stone. Like a promise he refused to release. Caleb's breath caught. Mercer's eyes widened with a fierce, rising fire. Sacrifice had not been the end. Humiliation had not broken the Patriot. Liberty, dripping and breathless, still fought to rise. The river had tried to silence a voice meant to awaken a nation. It had failed. Comment: "I stand with the Patriots." Abigail rushed into the surf, skirts heavy with river water, and together with Caleb, she pulled Elias Ward from the current's grip. His chest heaved. Life, faint but defiant, clung to him like a spark hidden in ash. Hannah collapsed against him, sobs shaking her small frame as she pressed her cheek to the rough fabric of his coat. Elias's eyes opened, bleary with pain, but he managed the smallest smile. His fingers brushed her hair. In that touch lived every mile of his struggle, every insult survived, every dream not yet surrendered. Mercer knelt beside them, reverence softening the iron in his voice. Your father stood straight without. "Standing," he said, placing the river-worn knife Elias once carried into Hannah's trembling hands. "This blade carved survival. Now it will carve a future." She held it close, as if guarding a torch still gathering flame. The first hints of dawn bled across the horizon, painting the riverbank in sober light. The Patriots melted back into the pines, Avery, Ruth, Jonah, Noah, Ephraim, each vanishing like ghosts returning to ordinary lives, waiting for the next call. Redcoats would soon thunder across these fields, searching for blame where justice had already spoken. Mercer knew a new hunt would begin. He accepted it. Liberty demanded no less. High above, hidden by shadows at the manor's edge, Arthur Whitcomb watched. Salt stiffened his cheeks where tears had dried. He saw men who killed his father walk away unpunished. In that moment, hatred forged him. One day he would trail the Patriots with relentless devotion. One day he would become the enemy's most dangerous weapon. Mercer glanced once toward the ridge, sensing eyes in the gloom, and understood the cost of rebellion wasn't paid in a single night. It collected interest across generations. In Milford, the people returned home changed. The silence that had once been submission turned inward and became resolve. Fear lost its throne. On the meeting-house sill each Sabbath, someone would place a sprig of yarrow, Elias Ward's humble trade, its scent a reminder that independence begins with the small, the wounded, the overlooked who refuse disgrace. At taverns, men lifted pewter mugs and toasted the cripple who would not bow. They told his story in low, fervent voices, the man in the chair who made a village choose dignity over chains. Elias Ward became proof that tyrants bleed when common souls awaken. But the greatest transformation unfolded inside the hearts of those who stood on that riverbank. They had tasted what it meant to act as a people, not subjects. They had witnessed courage stronger than bodies, resilience that refused the grave, patriotism carved into bone. These weren't rebels any longer. They were founders of a nation still in the womb of night. And when the sun finally rose, scattering the mist and gilding the water gold, it shone not on a conquered colony, but on the first quiet victory of a coming revolution. If this tale of sacrifice, revolt, and America's soul moved you, let me know. Tap the like button to keep this flame burning, and in the comments, write the words that guided. Elias Ward, through the darkness. The flame of freedom lives in me.